All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my little channel where I walk around and talk about history. I wander. So today we are in coastal Georgia. I forgot to mention, if you enjoy wandering around and talking about history or listening to me jabber about it, or just seeing pretty pictures, then hit subscribe and you can wander with me whenever I go somewhere. So today we are in coastal Georgia, like we do, and we are in Midway, Georgia. Midway, this district is called Midway because it is between the towns of Darien and Savannah, which were both founded in the 1730s by General Oglethorpe.
Oglethorpe.
I talk about him a lot, but you know, he was kind of a big deal in these parts. So where we are today is actually Fort Morris. Fort Morris was built, unlike the other forts that I visited so far, this one was built to defend Sunbury, which was a town that by the 1750s rivaled Savannah. It had 5 wharves, it had 2 churches, 3 squares, it was laid out in a grid, and just to give you an idea of how important this port was on the River Medway, if I didn't mention that, in the 1760s, the governor had noted that there were 56 vessels that had cleared Sunbury's customs house, and Savannah had cleared 160, so about a third. So a pretty good size. You've heard me talk about Sunbury before, and it is one of those towns that's just no longer here. By the 1840s, it was just gone, due to war, and mostly the Revolutionary War, and hurricanes, and there was just no need for it anymore. So, pretty bustling town that just, there's nothing left but the cemetery and memories. So, I'm kidding, those are long memories. So, Fort Morris was started to defend Sunbury, but it actually really was put into use during the Revolutionary War to defend against the British. We're just going to do a little walk through here. This is just such a pretty area. So, just for reference, east is there. So that's where the Atlantic Ocean is. We are on the River Medway. So, do you see this area that's straight ahead of us now? It makes me think that hobbits are going to run down that little hill and they're going to be chased by orcs. I love it. So here we're coming up on what remains of the fort. You can see they did have a moat. The moat was only filled. You can see parts of it straight ahead. Only filled when it rained heavily. It was made of earth and wood, and it was basically just for soldiers. Not big at all. I mean, it was here for defense, and that was it. There were barracks inside, and cannons, of course. And the Continental Army had soldiers here to defend Sunbury because, like I'd said before, it was an important commercial port at the time. So we're going into the fort now. Here we go. So in this kind of moat, you can see they would have had pointed big sticks that would have stuck out from the base of the wall. Let me try to look down a little bit. I'm not good at this yet. Be careful with me. So they would have been facing that way. Can you see my hand? Going that way. And they would have been pointy, and they would have theoretically repelled anybody trying to get in. There would have been a wooden bridge here. And here we are, inside the fort. I can hear the river. It's windy today, as you can probably tell. This is a good-sized river. Or maybe I'm hearing the wind. It says not to climb up on these walls. I'm not going to. I'm going to stick my hand up over here just so you get an idea of what it would have seemed like. There would have been parapets as I climb up the wall. There's the river. It's a good-sized river. Very pretty. I'm going to walk down that way. There we are. So this wasn't named Fort Sunbury. Oh my gosh, it was originally named Fort Sunbury. It wasn't named Fort Morris until 1778. So halfway through the game pretty much. I'm going to raise it up a little bit so you can see just, Spanish moss. This is a good day for it. The sun is shining, but you get the shadiness and just this beautiful Spanish moss. But if you can kind of get an idea, not terribly large. It's just crazy to me that there's just so many towns in this area up along this coast that just aren't there anymore. There's Fort Frederica, already been there. There's Sunbury. Oh, Old Dorchester, that's up in South Carolina. Sure, there's more. There is a historical marker on the way here. So very close by, that is for Dorchester Village. Okay, so this fort was well situated because it was protected by a marsh on the south, which would make me look like a liar. We'll go across again. So it was protected by marsh over there. The Atlantic Ocean is over that way, thereabouts. And the river itself was helpful in protecting. So there was a bend in the river so that any ships sailing up the river would be seen by anyone in the fort. So they would be fired on before they even came abreast of the fort. So this area, Sunbury, and this fort, there's more of those moats if you can see it, was also a staging area for patriots, continental soldiers who were planning an invasion of British-held Florida. Did not know that, so that just makes me want to head on down to Florida and check that out. So it's a small fort, but you know, it had a pretty important function. The British were, if you're not familiar with this part of Revolutionary history, towards the later years of the war, were trying to focus on the southern colonies, South Carolina, Georgia, which I should have known but did not, was the last of the 13 colonies. Probably could have figured that out on my own, but I read it somewhere and I was like, huh, interesting. Didn't know that. But now I do. So it's the last of the 13 colonies, but cities like Savannah had a pretty strong loyalist, a lot of loyalist sympathizers. They were definitely feeling very British and not very American. And I believe Charleston was as well, but I know that there was a lot of Revolutionary War fighting up in South Carolina in the Charleston area. And like I said, I feel like there are a lot of loyalists there as well. And I'm pretty sure that Charleston was in British hands for quite some time, as was Savannah, until about 1780, well, the end of the war, 81, 82. There was a siege on Savannah in 1779, which is where Sergeant Jasper met his demise. There's the Medway River. Let me pan over so you can see it. So, fun fact, my nephew was on the sailing team in high school, and this is where they would come down and practice. And if you can hear that wind and see the size of that river, you can see why. So it's all residential now. I mean, I think I think Richmond Hill is about the biggest large town around, if you're living here. It's just weird how that happens. And then I will go over to the Sunbury Cemetery so you can see where that is, but that is all that's left. There's a little gazebo that marks and has a map, you know, where things were, but this is pretty much it. There's gators here. Be careful. So there's that marsh, and then there's that bend in the river. And then there's a boat cleaning against that pier, just surrounded by marsh. I know the Sunbury Crab Company and the cemetery are right up that way. And I think that's where they kept those little 420s that my nephew would sail on. So yeah, this is very coastal Georgia, if you like. Coastal Georgia is, you know, it's not, sometimes people think of the coast and they think beachy. And yeah, we have Tybee Island, I think Cumberland Island. It's just a lot of barrier islands that, and just rivers that are just dotting the coast. I'll find a map and put it up, and then you can just see where it's just a bunch of blue. So this would be facing the fort from the river. It looks a lot more imposing from this side. Zoom up a little for you. All right. So yeah, not the biggest, but you know, not the most earth-shattering video. It's just pretty, and there you go. There's a good shot of so you can get an idea of just the water, the marsh. So Sunbury, if I didn't mention it before, I'll mention it now, and if I did, I apologize. I was having a camera malfunction, so there's that. Sunbury was pretty much gone by 1848. It, war, hurricanes, pretty much wiped it out. Okay. Sunbury Cemetery. So there were 3 squares originally, apparently good-sized squares in Sunbury. We had Market Square, King Square, and then Church Square. And this cemetery would have been in Church Square. As the name implies, there was a church on the northern end of the square, which would have been right about where we're looking now. So people were interred here. The earliest grave, 1788. The latest graves, 1911. Right now it's defined, according to the sign that I read, as a 1-acre lot, but it was much larger, so the square would have been really big. I took a picture of it. So there were probably graves outside of this little cemetery. And people live right there. So it's probably spooky. Okay. So, still in Sunbury. So there's this tiny little area here with this cute little gazebo. There's just not much there. There's a couple of historic markers that talk about famous people, but literally it's just all residential, and that is all that is left of the city. None of the original buildings. I was just at the cemetery. Oh, there's my car that I love. So the water is straight ahead. Apparently the streets ran east to west. The ships would dock at the end, at the wharves, and then all of the goods would come up through those streets. So this was the second largest city, or town, I should say, in Georgia, second only to Savannah. So this was by the Revolutionary War. Oglethorpe, once again, saw its potential, so I think he's the one that put the idea in somebody's head that there should be a town here. And it was pretty big, like I said. It was 496 rectangular lots that were laid out with 3 very large squares. There's a little, this old sign is just, they need to just fix it. But it was basically, I think it says here, on 500 acres. So Church Square, I don't know, that's where we were, where the cemetery was. Then there was, it looks like King Square was the biggest, which makes sense because at the time when this was founded in the 1740s, you know, they were a British colony. And then Meeting Square. I think I called it Market Square before. Oh, so I'm a liar. I don't know where. I would guess this would have been the area for King Square, the largest one, but I couldn't tell you. So here, let me actually move and zoom in on this little map. Here we go. Pretty cool. Always kind of like when I go to Bonaventure and I try to find the original plantation house. This makes me want to really find the original city. But like I said, it's all residential. Yeah, so I'm not going to be digging through people's yards. I'm sure somebody's tried. All right. It's a mystery. Not really, but kinda, because there's nothing there.